Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Think BRICS YouTube channel. I am thrilled once again to have a guest that's very popular to us and to our audience. I'm thrilled again to welcome Alex Krainer, who is a financial analyst and also a great commentator on the geopolitical issues of today. Welcome back, Alex. It's so nice to see you again.
Good to be with you again, Ben. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. And now, uh, we already know kind of the geopolitical chaos that we're really experiencing today. It seems like every day there's a new headline and has some crazy new cascading effect down the road. But I actually want to offer a different take with Donald Trump's attitude towards BRICS. So, and I want to sort of compare sort of what he's been doing recently. So we know that Trump has criticized BRICS openly. You know, as a group, he's threatened 100% tariffs on not just on the countries that get involved in trade with BRICS. He's threatened individual countries, trying to first South Africa and then China, Brazil, and obviously the recent spat with India as well. Um, but then you see on the other hand this sort of dressing down of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and broadcasting essentially to the worldwide audience and attacks on the European community and also those on the individual nations themselves. So I guess to sum up, there's like a long list of things that Trump has done really in the most recent 9 months about Trump's attitude towards BRICS. But then we come to this Alaska meeting, and it seems like Trump has really extended a hand and welcomed President Vladimir Putin and tried to have a really good progressive meeting, and was sort of unfortunately it was a whole new era of diplomacy really for the United States to really do such a thing. But I guess what my question is, do you think Trump realizes that these tariffs and all of these attacks on BRICS countries are actually making BRICS that much more cohesive and stronger because of it? Or does he think that the tariffs are really going to cause the disintegration of BRICS?
Um, I think that Trump is not playing his moves as advertised. Let me rephrase that. What he does and what he says that it is not the same, meaning that he is using let's say, the opportune talking points of the day to do what he's intended to do anyhow. So, you know, the allies of the United States, the entrenched Cold War thinking that's still prevalent in the United States, the kind of ossified hostility towards Russia, towards China, and so forth. They're there. They're a very significant part of the domestic audience and the domestic political class in the United States. And so he can do things by dressing them up as sanctions against Russia, against punishing those who trade with Russia and support Russia, and so on. But his real intentions, I think, is to introduce tariffs anyway. But by introducing tariffs, his moving the United States away from the British system of free trade back towards the Hamiltonian American system of political economy. This is not very popular because most people don't understand it, and those who do understand it are exactly some of the most powerful players in the United States who have benefited the most from many decades of this American free trade system, particularly Wall Street and the big, heavily subsidized American corporations in the big oil, big agriculture, big pharma, big tech, and so forth. And so this is jeopardizing their privileges, So rather than saying, okay, so we're moving away from the free trade system and towards the American system of political economy, he says, "Oh, we're punishing India because they're trading with Russia and so forth." Now, why do I think that he's doing this? Because pretty much he has declared so explicitly. He has said that he wants to make the United States into a global manufacturing superpower, which pretty much means that you need to erect a you need to erect tariff barriers around the U.S. markets. You need to create a protected zone, a protected economy in which U.S. manufacturers can have a you know a reserved a privileged access to their domestic market, so that they might be able to compete with foreign imports. Because during the time that this British system of free trade has been implemented in the United States, uh, the United States pretty much lost its manufacturing, a massive amount of it, massive percentage of it. It's all moved offshore. It's all moved to China and Brazil and Taiwan and so forth. And so to bring that back and to start to redevelop manufacturing domestically, you need a protected market. You need to instill tariffs. So I think that this is what he's doing, and I think that he's merely using this confrontational language against the BRICS, against India, against Russia, and so forth, just as a facade, as an opportune talking point that people will say, like, yeah, we have to hurt Russia and everybody who's helping Russia and so forth. And so then these measures slide rather than being challenged and opposed in the American media primarily, but also then in the public and in the business circle.
And so when we look at like Trump, like you said, wants to make this manufacturing superpower. He's been asking for a lot of investment from countries, not just his allies in the European Union and in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, but also with other countries in the Asia region that he's also been negotiating with because he wants that investment, right? But do you think so how will that affect the role of the dollar as the global reserve currency? Because if the dollar is very highly valuable, then it'd probably be a lot more expensive to invest in the United States, right? So could he have both here?
Well, dollar is very valuable in the free trade system, because you get to import a lot of stuff from everywhere around the world, and you pay it with paper script printed out of thin air, basically. And so in that sense, that's very useful. But that, the side effect of that system is that you lost manufacturing, and not only that, but basically your you lost infrastructure, because if you don't have manufacturing and you don't need to move goods around, then there's no pressure uh, to maintain ports, to modernize them, to maintain and build out an efficient rail system, airports, and so forth. So everything in the United States has gone dilapidated. And then with regards to the US dollar, like all reserve currencies through history, it has it has a limited shelf life. And dollar is not for the ages. It's a fiat currency based on fractional reserve lending. It's not even fractional anymore. It's just uh, you know pulling pulling purchasing power out of thin air. And so everybody understands, everybody who pays attention and has certain basic understanding about how the system works, understand that dollar is going to collapse. It's only a matter of time, and it already has been losing its reserve currency role in the world. And so there's been a lot of speculation that the powers that be intend to collapse the dollar deliberately. And so this is coming anyway. It's not something that Trump is doing, and if it wasn't for Trump, then this wonderful system and all these wonderful privileges would just like coast forever, unchallenged. It's coming anyway, so they have to prepare for a transition to a different monetary system, to a different currency. And then we always have to keep in mind also that the United States has $37 trillion in public debts, and this is just the Federal Reserve, sorry, the federal debt, the federal government's debt.
Right.
Uh, that's $37 trillion, but if you add up the state and local government debts, private debt, individual, corporate, financial, and so forth, you arrive at something north of $110 trillion, which is about $300,000 per man, woman, and child living in the United States. It's an absolutely preposterous amount that can never be paid back.
No. No
So
way.
let's say that by devaluing the dollar in whatever way, by printing it, by quantitative easing, by um, plowing loads of liquidity into the economy, you're diluting the purchasing power of the dollar. That's true, but you're also creating the dollars with which to pay back your debts, right? So it's a form of default, actually. Inflation is a form of default because you're going to pay back your debts, but you're going to pay with worthless dollars. So you're going to tell bondholders, "Here's your $37 trillion. Maybe you can fill a tank of gas with that money, but we paid our debts, so everything's good." But this is not unique. This is relatively typical. It happens to most market economies. No, it happens to pretty much all the market economies that are based on this. How do you call it? The same monetary system. The fiat currency printed out of thin air. This is a typical outcome. It forces the governments and the monetary authorities to backstop the bad debts that pile up in the system by printing money, through quantity. They invented a nice word, quantitative easing, but that dilutes the purchasing power of the currency. So instead of sacrificing your institutions, your banks and your central bank, you actually rob everybody else. So everybody who has savings, everybody who depends on fixed income, uh, you rob them to pay down your debts. And so
Hmm.
this is what Trump is going to do as well, because everybody does this. The only alternative to this is austerity. That you say, okay, we have to reduce the deficits, we have to cut back spending, uh, and but that predictably creates recessions and depressions, and then you have the risk of social revolts and revolutions, and it all happens in a very short period of time. So you're basically taking a risk of a social collapse to let's say deleverage the economy, and you could easily lose control over that, and you make yourself vulnerable to takeover by hostile forces. And I'm not talking about Russia and China, like a military, but
Yeah.
you give huge political points to your political rivals, like the Democratic Party, which could climb up and say, "Oh, look, Donald Trump destroyed our economy, so next time you have to vote for us," and then you lose the House, the presidency, the Senate, and you're done. Whereas if you go by the way of inflation, you get all kinds of maneuvering space, and you delay the crisis in time, and the crisis gathers gradually. People get used to it. They grumble, they hurt, but so long as people go to work, so long as the economy produces the basic necessities like food, energy, communications, spare parts, and so forth, there's not going to be a revolution, and the whole economy, the whole society can weather the crisis, and then at some point you cut off, you retire the dollar, and you introduce the new monetary system and the new currency. So that was going to happen anyway, but Trump could take advantage of this transition and the need to get rid of the dollar to achieve other ends other than what the maybe the globalist establishment would want. And obviously they would want to dilute American sovereignty. They would want to harness the United States into making it part of the global empire, and to keep the United States as the, let's call it, the military enforcement arm of the empire. And that's where Trump and the globalists are at odds with each other.
It's very telling to see how, like, the IMF has notoriously talked about austerity for countries with much of the debt that they can't pay back, and considering how austerity has affected economies in the past, now that it really seems inevitable that, or like you said, devaluing the dollar, the fact that they're not going to go to do the austerity route really shows how bad of austerity as a policy really is on ordinary people, and for the country in general. So when the United States is introducing, let's just say, day zero of, the United States is never, the dollar is constantly being devalued. It's no longer the reserve currency, really. Where do we see China in this perspective? Do they want to step up and make the yuan the new global reserve currency, or are they content with sort of the headaches that really the United States is dealing with right now with the impact of the dollar on this?
Well, yuan could become uh, one of the world's reserve currencies, simply by virtue of China having such massive role in global trade. So if they move away from the dollar, which is what they are doing, um, so far, with in absence of an agreed upon trade settlement currency for BRICS, or for the global South, however we want to cut it, uh, countries are increasingly conducting trade in their local currencies. So that means that if some nation is importing goods from China, uh, they're going to exchange them for the Chinese currency, right? So they're going to have renminbi balance. They're going to have yuan balances with Chinese banks, and so that's going to be on their balance of payments. They're going to have Chinese currency. But I think that that's not necessarily China's objective, because it also creates the risk of, you know, it it could present risks to Chinese economy if they're too exposed to foreign trade partners. You could be at risk of an external shock. And this is where the Chinese have very wisely implemented this dual currency, where they have renminbi for domestic circulation, and then they have a protected currency, which is protected, and then they have a different currency for foreign trade. Uh, I think ultimately the BRICS are going to agree to a if not a currency, a system that's going to be acceptable to all, where countries will trade in their individual in their domestic currencies against one another, but within some kind of a defined and managed system. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how this is going to evolve. I've read a number of white papers by some of the people who are making proposals for this system. It's a very, very complex problem to resolve, but it is solvable. We just have to find out what's going to be the solution in the end, and then there's the added complication that I think that the BRICS nations ultimately will want to bring the United States on board, because that's extremely important, and it's nothing to do whether they like Trump or don't like Trump, whether Trump is abrasive or not. It has to do with the fact that if the United States is on board with multilateral integrations, then the world can evolve towards, let's say, a stable, sustainable peace. If the United States ends up isolated and then, by default falls back into this Western colonialist, imperialistic camp, then it becomes a source of destabilization and permanent warfare in the world. And that means that it's going to have to be part of the solution, and that's going to take a long time to work it out. It could be quicker if maybe the Russians and the Chinese proposed a new currency and they call it the Trump dollar or something like that. I think Trump would like that, and he would be on board very quickly.
I can see it now with if they ever had a BRICS dollar with just Trump's face on it. Maybe that would be the perfect invitation for him to
I
get
think he'd go
involved.
for. I think he'd go for it.
Oh man, I think honestly, if he gets that by the time he leaves office, I think he'll consider his presidency a success.
Of course,
um,
yeah.
so it's funny because when we talk about like America stepping up its role in multilateralism, especially when we're talking about economic development integration, um, there's actually been clamorings for this for roughly, even before BRICS itself was created. There's an economist named Lyndon LaRouche. For those in America, I highly recommend you look into who Lyndon LaRouche was. Don't have enough time to discuss his role, but he was a very prominent economist in the United States, and he always reached out to get involved with Russia in economic integration as well as with areas in China, because he saw the opportunities that when combined together, the United States, Russia, and China, for one, what it could really lead to. And I kind of want to pivot towards your most recent article about Trump's and the Alaska summit between Trump and Putin, but specifically about a very popular tweet by Kirill Dmitriev, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, who's
Yeah.
Putin's special envoy for foreign investment, and he's been a pretty essential intermediary between the United States as well as Russia. So between his own credentials, his own connections, it's making him a really good kind of in between the two powers. Could you, for our audience, kind of explain what Dmitriev's tweet is and how it fits into your article?
Yes. So Kirill Dmitriev posted apparently on his Instagram account a cartoon picture of two images, right? Two very similar images, and in the top image you see the cartoon of a tiger, a bear, and a panda sitting around the table, very, very jovial, very happy, smiling faces, sharing tea as friends. And in the lower picture, you have the same. Only in addition to tiger, bear, and the panda, there's also the bald eagle. And then they have flags above them. So you have Indian, Russian, American, and Chinese flag. And then in between these two images, the question is which picture is better. And so Kirill Dmitriev said that 77% of his Instagram followers, who are mostly Russians, said that the lower picture is better, meaning that including including the United States, would be preferable. And so that's very important, and the fact that he tweeted that out, I think, spells out the the intentions and the hopes of the Russian administration, and also of the other BRICS members, and probably for the reasons that we already discussed. It's important for the future, not just economic development and prosperity of the world, but also the future of peace in the world. And then, how does that all fit together with the Alaska summit? Well, Alaska summit was proposed by the American side, and particularly the location. And we knew about that maybe a couple of days in advance. And I remember I was sitting together with Admiral Domazet, who is a Croatian geostrategist and a high level military person. And his first reaction when we found out that there was going to be a summit, he was he said immediately, the place where they hold the summit is going to be key. It's going to tell us. It's going to have a very, very important message in the place. And so then we kind of were trying to guess where it might be. Istanbul, maybe Tehran. What we didn't know, but he said it's not going to be anywhere Western Europe that's 100%. Like London or Geneva or something like that.
Mhm.
And then when they unveiled that it was going to be in Alaska, it was the da moment. Like, yeah, of course, because Alaska used to be Russian territory that Russia sold to the United States for strategic reasons. And then Alaska is the place where Russia and the United States physically come together. They share a border there. And at least since the 1860s, there have been ideas circulated at very high level of governments of connecting the two nations and the two continents together by by drilling a tunnel underneath the Bering Strait to physically connect the United States and Russia, and so by extension the continent of North America to East Asia. And so this project has been discussed periodically since that time, since Abraham Lincoln. It has been, Lyndon LaRouche was, as whom you mentioned, was a big proponent of that project. Henry Wallace, who used to be the vice president under FDR, was discussing this project with Joseph Stalin back in the 40s, and then in 2009, I think, when Vladimir Putin was the prime minister of Russia, he approved a project, I think, of about $30 billion project for development of Russian infrastructure towards the east along the Trans-Siberian Railway all the way to Chukotka Peninsula, and to build it in the way that would be conducive to connecting to this future tunnel. So again, having that project in mind, and then the Russians brought this project back into discussions a number of times since then. And I think that Vladimir Putin's government, they even proposed that Russia would pay 2/3 of the cost of building that tunnel.
Wow.
Henry Wallace, when he was discussing this with Stalin, made it explicit what the significance of the project is. It's not just enabling traffic to pass between the two nations. He connected it to the future of peace in the world, and that project accordingly has been Well, it has had hostile reaction from the let's call it the European neo-colonialist powers, because they are what happens with that project is, if you look at the map of the world from, let's say, from the northern perspective, from the perspective of the North Pole, you see that the connection of the United States and Russia through Alaska connects the two sides and circles East Asia and the United States, which are two of the world's most powerful economic units. And it kind of brings them together. And then this all branches out, towards Russia, Mongolia, Korea, Japan, India, and so forth. So it connects together the two of the world's most powerful economic regions, and it incorporates Canada as well. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so forth. And Trump has been talking about Canada in a very different way, let's say. And so what happens when that happens is that you see that on the map Europe uh, is way out there. It becomes the periphery. It becomes a very distant province. And so we're making a very sharp turn away from 5 or 6 centuries of Eurocentric world, because for the last 6 centuries, Europe has been the center of the world, and the center of political, economic, financial, military gravity. And now that center of gravity is moving to the east, and this connection across Alaska is connecting the United States to this. Because through thousands of years of history, India and China have been the leading superpowers of the world,
Yep.
economically, particularly. And the cycle of history is coming back to that for reasons that we can see. It's obvious. And then the summit of Alaska is maybe some kind of a milestone on the way of incorporating the United States with this, which makes all kinds of sense for everybody in the world. But obviously, the colonialist powers like Britain and France and Holland and so forth, they are they're very vexed about this, because they're left to the side, and we see that Europe is losing relevance, it's losing power, it's losing industry, it's losing their economy, it's losing their freedom and prosperity. So we have a decay on the scale of Western Roman Empire, and the Europeans are trying to hold it together by force. They're trying to hold it together by fomenting wars and more wars, and bringing daddy to their side. But I think that this might prove as effective as King Canute flogging the waves to stem the tide. Over the long term, I think, as Trump said, and then Kirill Dmitriev reposted, nothing can stop what's coming. Trump posted this, a very cryptic message, but then Kirill Dmitriev reposted that. And then another very significant, to my mind, very significant post at the same time that Kirill Dmitriev said was that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will prevent the outbreak of World War III. And he didn't say should, he didn't say might, could, he said will. And Russians are very careful about what they say. They choose their words with great care. And the fact that he said that Putin and Trump will prevent the World War III from happening, I think that's very significant. But it all makes part of this whole new realignment in the world. And I think it makes part of the United States under Trump changing the course of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah, and just one more super quick question, just picking up on what you were saying about they will prevent World War III. There was actually an image in your article, I think it was a post you're saying, where you could very closely see the Q kind of in Trump's left hand, right? And for American audiences, that's the reference to the QAnon, um, basically a reference to QAnon, which obviously Trump has been very vocal about. So you think that you think this is in relation to Trump and Putin stopping forces that are pushing the United States and Russia into World War III here?
From Trump's side, I don't know exactly. Trump is extremely unpredictable by design. He's doing his things by constantly misdirecting, and it's like he throws a stun grenade on that side and then does something on the other side. But the fact that Kirill Dmitriev posted that was more significant to me. I could dismiss Trump's post as boasting, as a psychological game, as distraction, whatever. But we have to keep the big perspective in mind. Trump has been wanting to improve U.S. relations with Russia since 2016. He's been sabotaged. He's been disabled through constant media and how do you call it, legal harassment. But when he came to power, within a few weeks, he picked up the phone and called Vladimir Putin. And since then, they have been in regular contact, and their delegations have been in regular contact. And we know now, because Marco Rubio told us 2 or 3 weeks ago, is that some of their discussions are secret. And then also about 2 weeks ago, Trump's head of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, forbid American intelligence agencies to share any information with the other four eyes, so the British, Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand's intelligence. She forbids sharing intelligence about the discussions between Russia and the United States. So that's an important indication. And then just last week, Trump announced that he would be phasing out defense funding for the countries that border Russia, meaning, Poland, Baltic states, Romania, and so forth. So anyway, I see that Trump is moving in a direction that's encouraging, in the sense of cultivating better, more constructive relations with Russia. And I think that that's critical for the future of peace in the world. And so, a lot of other things that he has been doing has been noise, making it difficult to read what he does. It's been also, how do you call it, irritating in a way, because the style is definitely boorish and borderline vulgar. But I think that the relationship between the United States and Russia is probably far and away the most important guarantee of peace in the world.
And it's crazy really to think about, because my parents' generation, I feel like that was as emphasized as clearly as possible, as the relationship between the United States and Russia, especially during the Cold War, was the most important thing. One misstep, one miscalculation, we could you could end up in World War III, and they made ads on nuclear war because of that fear and that reason. And I agree that that's very important. And just one more quick question just before we have to go. How do you think, for Russians and for the Russian government, that they could kind of discern between what the United States' policy aims are with Trump, but also kind of kind of filtering out the comments that they're seeing between in the House of Representatives, or I guess, the Russophobic senators and, congressmen. I know Lindsey Graham went on a tirade recently, accusing Russia of being like a terrorist state. So how is Russia really kind of navigating this, and balancing this really?
I assume that they're doing so by talking to the American side and clarifying, their moves, their intentions, and coordinating policy together. Because we have to understand that every day we are under a blizzard of misinformation and disinformation and psyops and so forth. And some sides, some parts of the political spectrum definitely want to do this deliberately. Concrete example, now what are we, 12 September? 2 days ago we had some Russian drones fly across into the Polish airspace. And now everybody in Europe is hysterical, and they basically want to start World War III over this. And of course, there are people in the United States who think that for Trump to show that he's strong, blah blah blah, that he should also be on board and escalate tensions with Russia and ultimately go to war against Russia at some point. Just to show how tough we are. But let's not forget that a few years ago we had a single Chinese, probably weather balloon, fly across the United States, and we had weeks of the same exact hysteria of people saying that Joe Biden should show toughness, we should go to war against Russia, and we should respond and bomb, and and then the whole thing blew over. And so the Russians understand that Trump is not only conducting American foreign policy, that he also has to run the gauntlet of his internal political considerations, and that he has to package things in a certain way for domestic political audiences. So I don't mean just his voters at home, but the political class, the Congress, who are all owned lock, stock, and barrels by various interest groups. The Israel lobby controls Congress, has greater control of U.S. Congress than Trump does. And then you have the military industrial complex, then you have the big pharma, then you have the big agriculture. You have all these corporate groups that spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year on lobbying. And so they have very, very significant control over U.S. Congress. And then they're going to oppose Trump and his policies if they see Trump's policies jeopardizing their privileges and their position in society. Russians understand this. So I think that they speak to Trump administration. Putin and Trump speak together fairly regularly, more regularly than we know. And then there are there are special teams on economic development, on security, that also communicate on the regular basis. So if Trump comes out to the journalists, to a press conference, and says a bunch of nonsense, the Russians know to let it slide and to ignore it, basically, because they're doing their discussions in private and coordinating policy in that way.
This is all very interesting seeing how this is developing right now. And like you said, Trump's been so hard to predict. I don't really think anyone can predict him. But you see all these actions against BRICS countries, not just as a collective, but also as these individual countries. So it'll be very interesting to see how not just BRICS progresses, but also the United States' relation with the other BRICS countries too in this time, to see that um, if this kind of Cold War standoff or something of that nature will continue, or if maybe over time we will see integration of the United States into more getting involved multilaterally with BRICS and other organizations. But for now, we do have to end the discussion here, but I really do want to thank Alex Krainer. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Think BRICS channel. And for those like myself who can't get enough of Alex Krainer, please be sure to go onto his Substack and follow the iSystems Trend Compass. He posts articles and key market findings nearly daily, and it's always a great read. And I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to really expand their knowledge about things that are going on in the world right now. But in the meantime, thank you again, Alex, so much for joining us today. This giving me a lot of interesting things to think about in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Ben. Always a pleasure to join you. And until the next time.